She revealed that Rimmer was the one who told her, which made him want to personally rip the guy's ears off. He apologized to his mother, and her stern expression softened just a little. Then she took his hands in hers and told him that being a mission leader takes a lot more than just being the top student. He has to determine the right course of action and guide the others down that path. That's not an easy task for one person. He's also responsible for choosing a formation to minimize any harm and bring everyone back home safely. The very lives of his friends will depend on the decisions he makes. He was a little taken aback. He had expected her to be furious with him, but instead she was giving him advice. Sylvia explained that clearing out monsters only sounds simple on paper. In reality, it's a very challenging task. They'll have to make sure every single one of the creatures is eliminated to guarantee the safety of the townspeople. She told him to remember that on this mission, he's no longer just a trainee. He's a full-fledged representative of Zgart. She wants him to show everyone that he is a swordsman who can truly defend the family's ideals. He admitted his confusion, saying he thought she was going to chew him out, and she exclaimed that, of course, she was angry. She was also hurt and had been worried sick about him. However, this wasn't the time for scolding. She hugged him, telling him with a smile to go and prepare for the mission. When he returned, that's when he would get his lecture. She was incredibly proud that he was flourishing after all his training, but she would never stop worrying about her son. He hugged her back, and then it was time to depart. Before they left, Rimmer gave them one last warning: anything could happen out there, so they must always be on guard no matter the circumstances. He told them to retreat if they encountered anything beyond their capabilities. They all responded in unison that they understood loud and clear. After that, he wished them a safe journey. The trip normally takes about a month, but since a path had been cleared for them, they were expected to arrive in a couple of weeks. He wished them all the best, and Rayon, as the team leader, immediately started giving orders. He commanded everyone to split into 4 squads. They would be moving out using the formation they had discussed that morning. Watching Ron take charge, the elf smiled, confident that the team would do great under his leadership. The kid is talented, not only with a sword and in releasing his aura, but he also has a brilliant mind. He was sure Rayons would complete this mission with ease and return, and he's only 15. Every single time, his expectations just keep getting higher. He watched the students depart as another instructor came up and asked if it was time for them to start following. With this much distance between them, the students wouldn't notice if they left now. Rimmer replied that it was still too early. One of them had 2 particularly sharp senses. He let out a huge yawn and said he was going to take a nap, which made the other instructors nervous since it was about time for them to leave. Rimmer commented that they should try worrying that much about the orcs instead. Some time passed, deep in a forest surrounded by a massive pile of bones. There was a cave that served as a den for some nasty creatures. Their leader had just been informed about a village that a squad of students was heading toward, so they decided to head there too. Their leader gave the order to take out anyone who got in their way, and with that, they set off. More time passed. The squad was already in the forest near the village when they ran into something unexpected. Another squad had appeared in their path, led by none other than Glenn Zgart. He was a kid from the main branch of the family and the top student from the 6th training hall. The squad leaders were confused, wondering how they could have possibly run into each other. Rayon recalled hearing that Glenn had joined the 6th training hall late because of some injuries, but he looked perfectly fine now. It seemed he was pretty skilled with a sword, too. Glenn announced that they were on a mission related to the orc raid and demanded to know what Rayon's group was doing there. Rayon told him his group had the exact same mission. This confused Glenn, who wondered if they'd both been assigned the same mission since he hadn't been told anything about it. Meanwhile, the night before they left, the instructors had all gathered at a local tavern. One of them mentioned to Rimmer that he'd heard his students did an outstanding job on their last mission. He noted that they were so young, too, but they still managed to handle those mountain bandits. Rimmer smiled proudly and said that even though he was their instructor, he was still incredibly impressed by them. He figured since they were on such a hot streak, maybe he should just send them to handle the orc raid. He was confident they'd wrap it up in no time. He even thought the leader might actually thank him for it. But just then, Methan, the instructor from the 6th training hall, appeared behind him, insisting his own students would take on this mission. Methan argued that teamwork is crucial for monster raids, and Training Hall 5 just wasn't cut out for it. He called them a bunch of individualists, claiming Hall 6 was far better suited for the job. He bragged that his students had just aced their Hell Week training without a single person dropping out, so they were obviously the ones who would be going. Reimer sighed, calling Methan out for being jealous that his kids were getting all the spotlight lately, and suggested, why not just send both teams on the mission together? After all, they still had to get rid of those orcs. Sending 2 squads at once would create some healthy competition, pushing them to work faster and smarter. Right, Methan agreed. But first, they'd need the leader's permission, and both were already getting excited, thinking about how it would all play out. At the mission site, Burr stepped forward, claiming they'd have communication issues, and told the other squad they could just head back. His team would handle it all by themselves. His words immediately ticked off Kane, who warned him not to say that again. Wasn't the 5th training hall biting off more than they could chew? His squad was far better suited for a mission where teamwork was key. He was certain Hall 5 would fail miserably, given their total lack of experience working as a team. Burr shot back that he was well aware of Kane's skill level, but warned him not to underestimate the 5th training hall. All the while, Ron just watched them argue, choosing not to interfere. He knew for a fact that Reimer was fully aware 2 squads were being sent. So why didn't he mention it beforehand? Closing his eyes, Ron realized their instructor wanted them to gain some real-world experience. This mission was designed to be as close to the real thing as possible. Teamwork and tactics were the most vital skills for a monster raid, and his team was seriously lacking in both. Reimer probably wanted them to compete with the 6th training hall to force them to work on their weaknesses. Once he figured it out, he started cursing that elf under his breath. Still, this was a great opportunity for everyone. Besides, before he left, his mother had told him to show everyone he was a swordsman who could become the family's ideal. Her words had been on his mind ever since. He finally stepped into the conversation, telling them both to cool it. Why were they wasting time on such a pointless argument? They both knew that at this rate they'd never reach an agreement, so maybe they should settle it with the competition. Burr asked what he meant, questioning why they'd waste energy on a contest when they didn't even know what was waiting for them. Ron pointed out that neither team wanted to back down from this mission, and he was no different. He figured since it was a raid, there would be more than enough orcs to go around, and there would definitely be some elite monsters. They should hold a competition to decide who gets to be the mission commander. The winning commander would then lead the charge to take out the elite orcs, sow chaos among their ranks, and then mop up the rest. It sounded reasonable enough. And if the leading team ran into trouble, it would just become an opportunity for the other team to step up. He asked if that worked for everyone, and Kane agreed, admitting it sounded fair. With the terms set, Ron suggested they head for the mountains to get started. And just like that, the competition was on. A small group led by Burr and Martha enthusiastically charged up the mountain. The rules of the competition were simple enough: either defeat the enemy team or capture their flag. It was a much better solution than arguing forever. Our protagonist suggested they come up with a plan, but his teammates were so cocky, they just blew him off. Especially Martha. She was brimming with confidence and couldn't wait to wipe the floor with everyone. She figured there was no point in using tactics on a bunch of nobodies. With a confident smirk, she leaped at them and kicked off the fight. Meanwhile, Ron tapped into his legendary senses to observe the chaos. Thanks to his heightened perception, he didn't even need his eyes to get a read on the battlefield. The fight was officially on. Luna broke his concentration, asking if it was really a good idea to let them charge in without a strategy. He simply told her that some people are too arrogant to listen to reason. She wondered aloud if they could even win, but Ron was certain they were about to get absolutely wrecked. Sure enough, Byrne and Martha were already getting overwhelmed by their opponents. They kept attacking, completely baffled as to why they couldn't break through. Individually, their opponents were weak, but their coordinated defense was like an iron wall. One of the opponents shouted that the world didn't revolve around them, so they should stop looking down on people. This comeback just left Martha completely bewildered. As dusk began to fall, they finally regrouped with the main squad looking utterly defeated and ticked off. Ron sarcastically asked if the fight was as easy as they'd imagined. It looked like they were the ones who had to tuck tail and run. That was their first mistake. The world doesn't just stop and wait for you to get stronger. Did you look down on them just because the Owen Kingdom wrote them off? Did you honestly think we'll definitely win because we were better last time? Well, this is what happens when you charge into battle with zero strategy and no intel on your enemy. Your sheer arrogance was your downfall. You wasted your stamina, your aura, and even gave them a free preview of all your techniques. Those students train every single day. Just because you're stronger on paper doesn't give you the right to underestimate them. Luna asked, "So does that mean we lost?" He replied, "Not at all. In fact, you have one more chance." Their spirits lifted instantly, and Martha declared she'd do whatever it took to crush those jerks. Ron just smiled, noting that at least now they were ready to listen. With that, he laid out his master plan for victory. Meanwhile, over at the 6th training hall, the students were discussing their recent opponents, saying the 5th training hall seemed kind of weak. One of them admitted they were interesting to watch, but his friend warned them not to get complacent. After all, the 5th training hall was the group that took down the Snow Tiger Claw. Bandits, one of the most notorious gangs in the entire alliance. He was sure they wouldn't go down that easily. Just then he spotted Martha heading their way and drew his sword, saying he knew this was coming and it was time to finish things. The girl angrily called him an idiot and swore that if he ever badmouthed them again, he'd regret it for the rest of his life. With that, she charged forward, her face a mask of pure determination. The guy yelled to his team, "It's a frontal assault, switch to formation 4 and focus on the front." He stepped up to block her strike, but to his utter shock, she blindsided him with an attack from the flank, leaving him totally baffled. At the same time, Byrne was charging toward another group of students. They recognized his opening stance and moved in confidently for the counter. But he completely faked them out, dashing right past them before unleashing a flurry of strikes, disarming 2 of them in an instant. The group's leader whirled around in disbelief, thinking, how did he switch his attack angle so quickly? Their entire fighting style had changed. How could they be so different? Now, meanwhile, Martha was single-handedly overwhelming 3 opponents at once. A smile crept onto her face as she thought he was right. She recalled him explaining his plan, asking why they lost when they were all individually stronger. Byrne had guessed it was because of intel and strategy, and Ron had confirmed he was spot on. The 6th training hall knew every one of their abilities and skills, and they built their entire strategy around that knowledge. Ron's team, on the other hand, had gone in completely blind, assuming they could win on raw power alone. As a result, they got crushed in a fight they should have easily won. That's when Dorian had asked worriedly, "So does that mean we're going to lose again?" Martha, furious, had grabbed him by the collar, telling him to shut his mouth, but Ron had said it was way too early to admit defeat. But they were seriously drained of both stamina and aura. They're in a tough spot right now, but they aren't the only ones who know how to use strategy. Buren asked if I had a plan. I told them that Kane has incredibly sharp eyes and a gut feeling to match, so he must have spotted them from a distance and sent out fighters specifically chosen to counter their abilities. Martha's all about raw power and endurance, but her attack patterns are a bit on the simple side, so he sent Swordsman, who could just tank her onslaught, forcing her to burn through her stamina. Burren's fast, but his attacks are way too direct, so they sicked Swordsman on him, who specialized in evasion. And with that, the easiest way to win this would be to simply switch your opponents. But I had a feeling they wouldn't go for that. Martha immediately insisted she wanted to beat her opponent herself, and Byrne was right there with her. I told them that in that case, they just had to fight smarter. Look, those guys are tough, no doubt. But their biggest weakness is their aura control. Martha, your job is to find a crack in their defense and hit them right there. Buren, you have a hard time with opponents who fight on pure instinct, but those types are usually complete suckers for a feint. You need to ditch your usual head-on style and start using more fakes. Martha admitted that it sounded logical, and then they both asked how I figured all that out when I'd just been sitting on the sidelines the whole time. I explained that while Kane does have sharp eyes, probably a little better than the average students, my sense of smell is on a whole other level. I was currently watching the entire battle with my nose. Everyone was holding their own. Even Luna wasn't getting pushed back. Then I heard footsteps behind me and turned around. I realized it was finally my turn. My opponent, Kane's guard. Since the situation had changed, it looked like I had no choice but to go after the flag myself. Kane said he'd been wondering why his team was suddenly on the losing end, and it turned out it was because I had ordered my people to change their tactics. The rumors about you being different weren't exaggerated after all, but I'm putting an end to this competition now. I heard you use a fire aura, but you're not special. He gripped his sword with both hands as a fire aura blazed to life, wrapping around his blade. I was genuinely surprised he's a fire user too. Kane smirked and said that unfortunately for me, his aura is the most powerful of any student here, even stronger than many of the graduates, so there's no way I could defeat him. Annoyed, I asked, "Is talking trash before a fight a family requirement or something?" Then I let my own aura flare to life and told him to bring it on. I was about to show him whose fire really burned hotter. The moment the words left my mouth, I shot forward. Cain looked shocked at my speed, remembering the rumors that I'd defeated not only Martha, but even Prince Owen. He leaped back, dodging my attack, and thought to himself, his aura can't possibly be as powerful as mine, but he's got some real strength. Still, I'm definitely the one on top here. My blade flashed in front of his face, and he barely blocked the strike, but to his shock, my flames erupted with even greater intensity, and a cut appeared on his cheek. He started to panic, thinking, how did he do that? Are my flames actually weaker? No, that can't be right. I began to push him back, launching a powerful downward strike. He managed to block it, but he was clearly struggling to hold my sword back. He screamed, putting all his strength into it, right before our clashing auras resulted in a huge explosion. The blast thundered across the entire area. In the end, Cain was the one who fell. I stood over him and asked, you were saying something about your fire being stronger. Compared to mine, you're just a little spark. Soon after, the rest of my squad came back. They were all shocked to see Cain on the ground near me, looking completely dazed, and asked what in the world he was doing here. I just told them that the quickest way to turn the tide in a losing fight is to go straight for the enemy commander. They were amazed that I'd planned for this all along. Buren spoke up, admitting I was right. Tricking his opponent was easy for him, but he couldn't have pulled it off without my instructions. If it weren't for my orders, they definitely would have lost to the 6th training hall. Martha, looking like she'd rather swallow rocks, admitted that I was right. If my advice hadn't worked, she would have expected my help. But the fact is, they won because of me. They all finally recognized me as the leader of the 5th training hall and were ready to follow my orders without question. I was honestly a bit surprised and thought to myself that it seemed like this whole ordeal had actually forced them to mature a little. It was definitely satisfying to hear that coming from the students of the 5th training hall. He told his squad they'd done a good job and that he was sure this fight had taught them a valuable lesson about the dangers of arrogance and overconfidence and what happens when you rush into battle without a plan. He warned them that if this had been a real fight instead of a competition, they would all be dead. He told them to never forget what they learned today. As he was debriefing his squad, Cain watched him, thinking to himself that Ron had completely shattered all his expectations. The guy had proven to be a master of both strategy and actual combat. He'd always thought the 5th training hall was just a bunch of arrogant upstarts, but now it seemed like he was the one who'd been acting that way all along. He walked right up to Ron and extended his hand, admitting that he'd learned his lesson. Ron had taught him to never let his guard down, not until the very end, and to always have a backup plan in case the first one falls apart. Cain confessed he'd been so sure they would win one way or another. After all, they had known about them the whole time, but not only did they get stomped in the group competition, he also lost to him in a one-on-one duel. He thought he was the stronger one, but it turned out he was just overconfident. It was a seriously important lesson for him, and he's actually grateful to our guy calling him a great teacher. Our MC cracked a smile, realizing he was on a completely different level than the rest of the main branch representatives. After that, he shook the guy's hand and said it was a good experience for him too. Cain then chimed in, saying that, just as they promised, they would support them on this mission. 2 weeks flew by after the competition. After trekking through a snowy forest, they arrived at a cliff where they could finally see their destination, a small village with zero value in terms of exclusive goods or tourism. It's just a spot where a few farmers settled down to live off their land. This mission isn't anything special. It's just another job clearing out monsters from a territory. However, he's got this nagging feeling that someone's been watching him this entire time. It's not like the feeling of having their mentors around. This observer has a sinister vibe, as if they're analyzing the best way to take them down. He looked around, figuring the smartest play was to be careful and mislead the enemy. He called out to Burr, telling him he needed to ask him for a favor to take on the role of commander for this next mission. The guy was completely stunned by his request, so Ryan explained that on the first mission, only he and Luna had fought the Snow Tiger Claw's bandits. So it would be better if they took the lead this time. Besides, wasn't he the one who declared on the first day of official training that he would definitely surpass him? Wasn't this the perfect chance he told him to show everyone what he'd learned all this time? Burr hesitantly agreed, adding that he'd prove he has changed. After that, he told the others that he would be leading this mission. They weren't against it at all and were ready to follow his instructions. Meanwhile, our MC approached Martha and told her he'd explain the reason later, so she shouldn't get worked up about it. She replied that she didn't need a separate explanation. After all, she promised she would follow his order, and that's exactly what she intended to do. She then went over to Buren and started talking with him about something, and Rayon asked Wrath, "You don't feel like someone's watching us?" Wrath's reply made it clear he had noticed it too. He smirked and noted that it was obvious since he had, after all, adopted his abilities. Our MC asked where they were and how many, but Wrath just chuckled, saying he wouldn't tell him where the lurker was. He said Ron could figure it out himself. From Wrath's choice of words, Ron figured out there was only one enemy, which left Wrath baffled as to how he knew. Our MC pointed out that he said he, not they, and thanked him for the information. Realizing he had let it slip so easily, Wrath started cursing up a storm, but Ron wasn't paying him any mind, thinking that they couldn't be sure he was the only one. It was clear only one person was watching them, but there could easily be others hiding somewhere. He couldn't let his guard down. Because of this, he sighed heavily, realizing this mission wasn't going to be a walk in the park. After a while, the man who was spying on them returned to his commander and reported that they were the scions of Zgart. The commander asked one of the 6 emperors, even though they're not that tough altogether. The man replied that he thought they were just students. They didn't have a mentor with them, so it was most likely their second mission. His commander asked, "No one spotted you, right?" He assured him he was certain. They didn't even realize he was nearby. The commander then smiled, saying he didn't think mere students could see through his subordinate's disguise. His subordinate pointed out that they had already taken control of the orcs, so he didn't understand why they had sent a bunch of trainees here. The commander said he was sure the villagers had told them everything. They weren't happy about the change in management and asked for help, claiming the number of orcs had increased. He thought they'd find the mana stone quickly, but it seemed they were dead wrong. His subordinate looked toward the village and said that the item was nowhere to be found. Maybe it was in the village. Did that mean they should start the attack now? The commander disagreed. He wanted to wait a little longer. But his subordinate countered that this was a golden opportunity to deal with the kids. He said that killing a few trainees wouldn't be that difficult. The real problem was the mana stone. If they acted recklessly, it would be exposed, and that would be a catastrophic failure. The plan was to let them handle a few monsters, let them feel like they'd accomplished their mission, and keep them in the dark. He slipped on his helmet, and his appearance transformed in an instant. His muscles swelled, and his skin turned a deep green, completing his transformation into an orc. He declared that the moment those guys left, they would raid the village and wipe it off the map. A while later, inside one of the village buildings, R observed Burr admitting to himself that he'd been a bit concerned about him at first. But the guy was a much better leader than he'd given him credit for. He wasn't using his title to throw his weight around. The mission always came first. His first move was to calm the nerves of the village chief and the locals. R could see how hard he was trying, so he figured there was no reason to worry. He and the rest of the team could definitely handle these monsters without his intervention. He glanced out the window, his mind on the real issue, the person who had been tailing them on the outskirts of the village. He wasn't entirely sure, but he had a strong feeling the surveillance lifted the moment they entered the village. It might just be the Zgart house keeping tabs on them. Then again, it could be someone else entirely. It looked like they would get all their answers tomorrow. The next morning, Byrne discovered tracks in the snow and scanned the area. He announced that there were definitely monsters roaming nearby. The village chief had mentioned that monsters appear annually, but this year their numbers were 3 times higher than usual. The villagers couldn't possibly handle an invasion of this size by themselves. To be specific, their scouts had already spotted over 100. That meant the total force could be well over 200. However, Byrne felt the numbers were only part of the problem. It was obvious his team was unfamiliar with this forest, so the villagers were sending a guide to make sure they didn't get lost in the mountains. This guy was the fastest runner in the village and would be a huge asset as their guide for Mount Sabu. Kabir, the guide, looked a little tense, probably thinking he knew something was up when the chief visited him the previous night. Despite that, he'd been asked to guide the Zgart members. The protagonist noticed his unease and told him not to be afraid. They promised to do everything in their power to see him return home safe and sound. Byrne then shouted for everyone's attention, saying the most dangerous foes out there were the orcs. However, the goblins and kobolds could also cause a lot of trouble since they loved using poison and other dirty tricks. Even a minor wound could be fatal. so they all needed to stay on high alert. He then ordered the 6th Training Hall to cordon off the area and watch for any monsters attempting to escape. Kane confirmed the order, saying they would get it done. Byrne then led the main group forward, announcing that it was time to start the cleanup. He declared they would eliminate the monsters menacing these lands, then charged ahead with the others, yelling for them to show everyone the full might of the Zgart family. At the same time, Wrath called them a bunch of morons, muttering that he'd never seen anything so stupid. They were supposed to be setting up an ambush, and now they were just screaming, completely giving away their position. In the end, all their careful preparations were for nothing. The MC watched the scene with a calm expression, remarking that they were just shouting to burn off their nervous energy. It was natural for a first-time cleanup mission. He looked at the MC, thinking it was as if this wasn't his first mission at all. He wasn't nervous in the slightest and seemed to see the bigger picture, carrying himself like a battle-hardened veteran. The Burn squad ran into some orcs on the trail and immediately engaged. A smiling Martha declared she was going to wipe them all out. With a calm expression, he drew his sword, saying they should take out the goblins and kobolds first before focusing on the orcs. Suddenly, one of the squad members shouted that their line was broken and 2 massive orcs were charging through. Kumbar's face went pale with fear as he yelled, "The orcs are coming this way." He thought, "I knew it. I never should have come." Just then, Ron, looking completely unfazed, stepped between Kumbar and the monsters, landing a devastating blow on the first orc. Without a moment's hesitation, he dashed toward the second beast and struck it with another powerful slash of his sword. As he sheathed his blade, the monsters collapsed, grievously wounded. The stunned guide dropped to the ground, stammering, Are they already down?" Ron turned to face him. He called out his name. "Kumbar, you're not hurt, are you?" The guide, looking shaken, replied in a worried tone that he was fine. Ron then calmly said he had a question. "Are there any local legends about these mountains? Anything about a great treasure? Or a powerful monster?" Kumbar's eyes lit up as he recalled something. "Yes, there is one story," he said. "Legend has it that hundreds of years ago, a huge battle was fought right here between a goblin king from the west and an order of knights. I've heard the goblin king's ring is still hidden somewhere in this area." That piqued the protagonist's interest. He thought to himself, so that's what this is all about. That feeling of being watched. It had to be Eden. They're a cult that worships one of the 5 demon kings, a group notorious for their insanity. Eden's ultimate goal is to bring back the age when monsters ruled the world, a time when humans were forced to worship them. But if it were that simple, they would have been wiped out ages ago. Their real power lies in their ability to tame and control monsters. What's more, despite being human, they can wield the abilities of the monsters they control. They're on par with the Zgart family in terms of strength. This bizarre power they hold is a secret unknown to even the continent's most prominent families. But he knows their secret, all thanks to Daryus, on a mission for him once they ran right into Eden's followers. The entire Shadow Squad was annihilated that day. In that living hell, he was the sole survivor. He didn't think much of it back then, but looking back, something was definitely off. Daryus already knew that Eden used mana stones, but how could he, one of the 6 emperors, have known that? And if he knew why, didn't he expose them to the world? Raph glanced over, asking him what was on his mind. A deep, dark rage began to boil inside him. Just thinking about Daryus was enough to make his blood run hot. He forced himself to calm down. Right now, Eden was the priority. He figured their goal had to be the Goblin King's Mana Stone. It's been hundreds of years since the Goblin King was defeated. He was certain its Mana Stone, which must hold immense power, was hidden somewhere around here. They're probably just using us to confirm the mission's completion. The moment we leave, they'll swoop in and continue their search for the stone. Meanwhile, Byrne charged at the lead monster, sword raised, yelling, "That one's the boss, I'll finish him in one clean strike." But suddenly, a blur of motion exploded in front of him, kicking up a cloud of snow. Martha had already taken down the monster he was targeting. With a grin, she said, "Sorry, this one was mine." Byrne clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Hey, that was a total kill steal," he grumbled. He then turned to the others and shouted, "The leader's down. Let's clean up the rest of them." The protagonist turned to Kumbar, who was standing nearby. "About that story of the Goblin King, has anyone ever found any treasure or gems in these mountains since that battle?" Kumbar paused to think. "Well, when I was a kid, our village chief went up into the mountains and returned with a brilliant red gem he found at the summit." This immediately grabbed the protagonist's attention. "Where is that gem now?" he asked. Kumbar lowered his voice. Most people don't know this, but it was buried beneath the chief's house. Ever since then, our village has been strangely warmer. The protagonist was shocked by this revelation. This is even worse than I thought, he realized. If Eden couldn't find the Mana Stone in the mountains, their next target must be the village itself. A short while later, the squad members reported that all orcs in the vicinity had been eliminated and the area was secure. With their mission complete, they headed back to the village. The village chief gripped Byrne's hand tightly, expressing his gratitude for their work. He said the Zgart family were truly the experienced warriors the stories claimed they were. He was incredibly thankful for their help. Byrne replied with a calm demeanor that they were just glad they could be of service. Rollin stood off to the side, observing the whole thing. He was snapped out of his thoughts when Martha asked if everything had gone according to plan. She added that, from the look on his face, she wouldn't have guessed so. He turned to see her sitting casually on a tree branch, eating an apple. He told her he didn't know yet, but he would let her know when the time was right. She hopped down from the branch and said he didn't need to worry. No matter what, she would follow his orders until the mission was officially over. Luna then walked up to him as well, calling his name and asking what he was doing over here. He looked troubled, and she couldn't see any joy from the victory on his face. He simply told her that everything was fine. They had to get moving because the village chief had promised them a feast, and he figured Eden wouldn't make a move until they were gone. All the important stuff was set to happen the next day. On the outskirts of Cebu village, Byrne walked with the team, smiling to himself about how well everything had gone. They had wiped out all the monsters in the mountains of Cebu and had only walked away with a few minor scratches, even though it was their very first mission. They did an awesome job. He figured that must be why the leadership role was handed over to him. There hadn't been a single flaw in his command. He still didn't get why he was given that kind of authority in the first place, but he hoped he'd proven that his leadership was just as good. With a small smile, he announced it was time for them to head out. They hadn't gone far before the protagonist suddenly told everyone to halt. They all turned to him, asking what was wrong. "Why are we stopping? It's too early for a break." With a serious expression, he said, "The real mission starts right now." Byrne looked at him and asked, "What do you mean by that?" He calmly replied, "I'm saying the mission isn't over yet." Byrne was flustered by this. "But we killed all the orcs and even got rid of the bodies. What else could there possibly be?" He reminded him our mission was to protect the village. Still not getting it, Byrne asked, "So what's the problem?" The MC revealed someone's been watching us this entire time. They were watching us up until an hour ago. Then they just disappeared. Most would think it was the instructor, but I definitely felt hostility. It was a gaze far too hostile to be an instructor's. The surveillance had begun even before they reached the village and only stopped once they were a good distance away. Byrne was shocked by this. "Are you being serious?" Martha came over and asked, "Did you say they were following us before we even arrived?" He clarified, "To be exact, it started the moment we climbed the hill near the village." She realized, "So that's why you handed over your authority to him." He agreed, "I decided to conceal my presence to buy time and analyze the enemy." Kane thought to himself that he had also felt something was off during the fight. It was a different vibe than the usual observation from an instructor. Still, he never would have guessed they were being tailed. Byrne asked, "So that's the reason you made me the leader?" He nodded. "I figured if I gave you command, I could freely keep an eye on everything else. You handled the task perfectly. I'm sure that because of you, the enemy thought you were the party leader and completely overlooked me. You're a true Zgart. For that, I'm going to recommend you as deputy when we get back." Byrne felt a pang of disappointment thinking he had been his equal. However, it turned out he was just buying time to study an enemy that nobody else even noticed. He'd been celebrating his success, completely oblivious to the real situation. The protagonist said, "Let's start with this. Orcs are creatures that rarely team up with other species. Yet here we see orcs and goblins working together. This implies our enemies can control monsters. Our job is to protect the village, and it's not done yet. Since the village is still threatened, we have to return to Cebu, but we need to move stealthily so our enemies don't suspect a thing. Some camouflage would really help right now, but we don't have any." A squad member then stepped forward, pulled out his gear, and asked, "Will this work?" He was a little stunned by this and asked where he got it. The squad mate simply said he brought it just in case. The protagonist asked, a bit dumbfounded, "You carry this much with you, just in case. All right, then we'll proceed just like we're preparing for a stealth mission." He called over to Crane. "You're the fastest one here, so I'm giving you the responsibility of reporting this to the instructor." Crane agreed and left immediately. He then turned to the others and said, "Follow my orders no matter what happens." 5 hours later at Eden's temporary shelter near Mount Cebu, the scout returned and reported that they had left. "We checked the other side just in case. It's clear too." Their leader said, "Excellent. Let's get down to business." Then he activated a recovery skill, and a swarm of orcs clawed their way out from underground. He stood among them and commanded that they were to kill everyone. No one was to be spared. Burns spotted the horde of monsters charging toward the village and exclaimed in surprise that there were actually orcs left out there. He declared they would definitely finish them off this time, but the main character calmly stated that now was not the right moment, reminding them they were being closely watched. These weren't just monsters, they were being controlled by people. They didn't even know who their true enemy was. He then added with a worried tone that there were far too many orcs. The village couldn't possibly handle such a massive number of monsters. He looked at the other man calmly and asked if he understood that they would all die if they made a single mistake. "Right." The man, looking anxious, shot back, asking if they should just intervene now to save the village. He reminded him of what the instructor taught them about understanding the true nature of a mission. The time just wasn't right yet. They had to be extremely careful because their enemy was Eden. His words sent a shockwave through the group, and Martha asked if he meant the Eden led by the 5 demons. He confirmed that if someone was controlling monsters, it was either Eden or the Monster Lord, so they had to be cautious. Burr, looking a bit worried, said that he knew how strong Eden was, and that he was right to be careful. However, if they didn't act now, half the village would be wiped out. Were they just going to hide and watch people get slaughtered? He declared that the Zgart family wasn't the type to just stand by and do nothing. Such a naive way of thinking. He demanded they fight immediately, yelling that it was what true family members would do. With that, he leaped from the cliff to chase the monsters, shouting that he didn't care if anyone came with him. However, if they considered themselves true members of the Zgart family, they would follow him. The others were clearly unhappy with his reckless move, but Luna announced she was going too. The next second, she jumped off the cliff right after him. The rest of the squad agreed that he was right. As a family, they couldn't just retreat, because their opponent was one of the 5 demons. They were new recruits for the forces of the 6 emperors. They were all going. They had to hurry to protect the village and its people. Cain then called out to the members of the 6th training hall, telling them they were moving in. 2. They would support the 5th training hall and engage the members of Eden. With a roar of agreement, they all charged after him. Ron and a few other members remained on the cliff, and he thought to himself that everything was unfolding exactly as he'd predicted, based on his assessment of Burr and the rookies. They had zero tolerance for injustice, so of course they would dive headfirst into battle to stop Eden and the monsters. That was precisely why he'd sent a message to Luna with his aura beforehand telling her to follow them. With the 3 of them working together, not even Eden could handle them, barring any unforeseen variables. He turned to Martha, who was standing by a nearby tree, and asked why she hadn't gone. He was sure she would have been the first one to charge into the fray. She replied with a calm expression that she had already told him she would follow his orders to the very end. He chuckled at that and said that in that case, they would also head toward the village. However, they needed to conceal their presence. He was certain that some of Eden's members were lying in ambush as reinforcements. He could clearly feel a powerful bloodlust emanating from the mountains, not from the village. The 5th and 6th training halls could easily handle all the monsters, but if they came face to face with the leader, it would get dangerous. Of course, that only applies to a direct fight. For an assassin, however, the rules of engagement are a little different. The party members who had charged ahead were already starting to fight the monsters, and Byrne yelled for them to avoid the orcs' direct attacks, focus on dodging, and then counter. He ordered anyone having trouble alone to team up, reminding them that if they failed to stop them here, the entire village would be in danger. As he fought beside them, he realized these orcs were a lot stronger than the ones from yesterday. Still, if this was all they were up against, defending the village would be no problem. The real issue was that as long as Eden was involved, the attacks would be relentless. With a worried look, he muttered that he'd been right all along. He warned everyone to stay vigilant and watch out for a surprise attack from the forest. The squad members spun around, spotted figures in the trees, and shouted that it was Eden's Green Phantom Squad. Byrne saw them too, thinking that based on the goblin masks and headdresses, it was definitely them. He knew they were in the area, but he never imagined there would be this many. His gut told him there were well over 40 of them. They were going to need a smart strategy to fight an enemy with such numbers. He shouted to Cain, putting him in command of the troops. Their one job was to keep the enemy out of the village. He then ordered Luna to use her icy wind to freeze the feet of the orcs and green phantoms, saying he would handle the rest. She gave her sword a confident flourish, her expression calm as she confirmed she understood. She swung her blade, unleashing magical energy that erupted into frost spikes from her aura. An orc braced itself against the blast and glared back at them. Burn swung his own sword, activating the continuous flow technique. He shot forward at blinding speed and cut down 2 monsters with his autumn wind sword style. An enemy perched in a tree whipped out a blowgun and fired a dart right at him. He sensed it just in time and managed to evade the attack. The other party members also saw the poison darts, and someone yelled for everyone to either block them with their aura or dodge. Just then, they spotted a small pouch hitting the ground and bursting open with poison gas. Burn stared in shock, realizing this poison was way more powerful than anything the monsters typically used. He screamed for everyone to cover their noses quickly. But his party members were already inhaling the fumes, collapsing to their knees and gasping that they couldn't even lift their swords, let alone use their aura. He grimaced, thinking that it wasn't just them having a problem. He could feel the effects himself. His body was refusing to obey him. He saw that Luna had also gone pale, yet the orcs and green phantoms were completely unaffected. At this rate, they were all going to be annihilated. Suddenly he felt a powerful and destructive energy. He looked over and saw Martha, who along with 3 other squad members was charging the monsters, screaming that since the idiot idealists failed, it was their turn to take on these Eden freaks. She declared they wouldn't let a single one of them escape. They immediately started clashing with the monsters, much to the relief of the poison fighters, who said that if they'd been any later, the poison would have killed them all. Someone urged the others to get up and help. A small smile touched Byrne's lips. For some reason, he didn't see Ron with them, but Martha's arrival had completely turned the tables. They could definitely win this if they just pushed a little harder. Seeing the shift in battle, several members of the Eden squad turned to flee, yelling about how these newbies could possibly be so strong. They shouted that they had to get out of there or they were dead meat. They stopped dead in their tracks, however, when their leader appeared and furiously asked, "Are you actually trying to desert the battlefield?" The squad members stared up at a massive creature blocking their path, and Byrne instantly knew this being was on a whole other level than the green phantoms. It wore a victor's headdress and could speak the human language. This was one of Eden's battle green phantoms. Byrne said aloud that even if it wasn't a high-ranking one, what was a commander from Eden doing out here? The creature spoke, saying, "News of your return reached me. Why would you come back when you knew an ambush was waiting?" She's pretty good for a newbie. He continued, his eyes on the black-haired girl. Judging by her strength, she's probably already figured out that if she wants to save her own life, she'd better run from here as fast as she can. Most of you will die today, and it's all because you don't know your place. He then launched his attack, overwhelming all of them with incredible speed, and they couldn't even leave a scratch on him. The others stared in utter disbelief, asking, "Did he just take out 3 of them with a single blow? Where's Sir Kane? He's at the barricade fighting the orcs. Then where did Ron go? There's no way he'd come help us after seeing a monster like this." The Eden leader glanced down at Martha and asked if she could still get up. As far as he could tell, she was the most resilient one out of all these idiots. Of course, she was the only one who could sense their presence. She would just be another little sprout for him to crush like all the other insects without any skill, will, or discipline. Their luck had just run out. He swung his weapon and roared that they would all die today. Just then the protagonist shot in from behind with incredible speed, swinging his own blade and declaring that wasn't going to happen. As he prepared to strike, his sword ignited with his aura, and he proclaimed that this was his enemy's fate. Unleashing the cyclotorsion skill, the Thousand Fire Technique's first flame, he sliced clean through the monster's arm, sending it crashing to the ground. But the creature just laughed, admitting it was a solid ambush, almost as if he never expected him to actually dodge the attack. With a hint of frustration, he muttered that the freak only lost an arm, which is why he'd aimed for a quick one-shot kill from behind. The monster sneered that for a surprise attack, slicing off his arm was impressive, calling him a promising young talent from the Zgart family. but that was probably the extent of his power. Judging by his condition, it was obvious that one attack had drained nearly all his stamina. His hands were even trembling. The monster figured he'd bet everything on that one sneak attack to finish him off, and now he could barely even move right. "Aren't you supposed to be the one in charge here?" The monster cackled. "Did you seriously think the top brass would go all out in some backwater village by... Oh, I bet." He stood his ground and calmly replied that their particular brand of crazy was just hard to grasp. The monster eyed him, remarking that he had a pretty sharp tongue for someone who looked so plain. "We'll see how long that mouth of yours keeps running." As the MC swung his sword, he thought grimly that he still hadn't fully recovered his strength. But then again, neither had the monster. He parried the creature's blow, who asked in surprise how he managed to block it, admitting he was tougher than he looked. He just stared back and shot back. "What kind of swordsman would I be if I couldn't even handle a hit like that?" That seemed to tick the monster off, and they erupted into a flurry of high-speed strikes. Watching from the sidelines, a stunned Burns wondered what in the world was happening. That green battle phantom took them all down with just a couple of swings, yet here he was, fighting him on even ground, and using the same continuous flow technique. He thought he was finally starting to catch up, but the guy's real skill level was already way beyond what any rookie could possibly comprehend. Martha watched as well, realizing this was his true power. Everything he'd shown them before was just the tip of the iceberg. Still, she thought it might not be enough. Even though they looked evenly matched, Ron hadn't had time to recover the power and aura he'd spent on that initial ambush. Could he really defeat that green battle phantom with what little strength he had left? Luna spoke up, insisting that they had to help him. Martha glanced at her, asking if she couldn't see that she was barely holding on herself. Luna was weaker than the rest of them, yet she was determined to jump in. If she made a single mistake in that fight, she'd be killed instantly. But with a calm expression, Luna just said it didn't matter. Martha stared, expecting her to be terrified. But instead, she was even more composed than usual. Had following him really changed her that much? Getting to his feet, Byrne declared he was ashamed for ever hesitating. "She's right, we have to help him." Martha then turned to Byrne and asked, "So the one who started all this madness finally decides to speak up? Do you honestly think a couple of rookies jumping in will change anything?" Byrne calmly replied that he couldn't just stand by and abandon a teammate. "We are swordsmen of the Zgart family." Martha considered it, then agreed, adding that they had to take full responsibility if things went south. They needed to get into formation and join the fight. With a grim expression, the commander noted how shocking it was that some pathetic rookie could hold out against him for so long. The kid had so much talent, he'd even consider recruiting him for Eden. "What's your name?" he demanded. The protagonist, looking completely drained, gave him his name. The commander's face turned serious. "So you're a descendant of the main branch." His hair and eye color were all the confirmation he needed. "It seems the blood of the Northern King of Destruction runs through your veins. I'll have to take back my offer. In fact, now I'll use every ounce of my power to kill you, no matter the cost." Immediately after, he unleashed an incredibly fast slash with his weapon. The main character watched in shock, thinking, "This lunatic just got faster. Is he burning through his own life force to draw out more power?" He was barely hanging on with his ring of fire still not fully recovered. His attention then snapped to Martha, who was attacking the monster from behind. She slashed at its back, causing it to spin around with a look of disgust. "How dare a pathetic insect like you even touch me?" he snarled before sensing something else and whipping back around. He saw Luna charging toward him. She skidded to a stop right in front of him and unleashed her ice aura, the skill known as Breath of Winter. Right on her heels, Burr sprinted past and leaped at the monster sword, swinging wildly as he activated his skill, continuous flow technique, starlight radiance, but suddenly the orc snatched him right out of the air. Hoisting him overhead, he sneered, "Did you really think you could defeat me with such a pitiful attack? It seems I greatly overestimated you. If you were at least on the same level as that dumb blonde, you might have actually landed a hit." But unfortunately, he never got to finish his sentence because Burr cut in with a small smile. "You're right, an attack like this could never beat you, but it was enough to buy some time." The orc's attention was pulled to Martha, who stood nearby, beginning to radiate an immense power as she activated Titanic Aura Ultimate Meteorite. She swung her massive sword, shouting, "Let's see if you can handle this." She struck with incredible force, her momentum carrying her to a stop directly behind him. He completely tanked the hit, spun around, and hurled Burr's body straight at her. The impact sent them both flying backwards, slamming hard against a tree. He looked down on them calmly. "You little insects need to learn your place." He scoffed. "Don't you understand that all of your attacks are completely pointless?" "That's where you're wrong," a voice cut in. From behind him, the main character stood concentrating a powerful energy. "Thank you, everyone. Thanks to you, I had just enough time to recover. I promise I won't let the opportunity you all risked your lives for go to waste." The orc stared, demanding, "Where did you get all that power? Just who are you?" Ron raised his sword high and addressed the green battle phantom. "You should feel honored. This is the first time in all my training that I'm using this technique on a living opponent. To be honest, I didn't think I was ready to use it yet, but this battle proved to me that I can handle it." Thousand Flames technique. Winds of blazing domination. He channeled a massive torrent of fire into his blade, his eyes locked on his opponent. The phantom stared back with a flicker of worry, wondering what was happening to that flame. It was completely different from before. His intuition screamed that it was dangerously powerful. He had to kill him right now at any cost. He lunged forward, roaring for his opponent to die. But the protagonist was faster, striking first with a devastating blow from his energy-charged sword. His opponent couldn't withstand the sheer force of the attack and crashed to the ground with a deafening thud. Completely spent after that final attack, he bent over gasping for air. The others stared in absolute shock until Byrne finally stammered, He actually defeated the green battle phantom." But Ron raised his sword high in the air, shouting, "This isn't over yet. There are still green phantoms from Eden out there. We have to destroy every last one of them to bring peace and prosperity back to this village." In response, his party members rallied around him, shouting in unison, "We're awaiting your orders." Following his command, they worked together to wipe out the remaining monsters and members of Eden. Afterwards, Byrne approached him and called out his name. "You were right," he said. "If you hadn't shown up to help, we would have been wiped out for sure. The villagers we were supposed to protect would have all died too." He thanked him for the save and apologized for disobeying orders, admitting he would have gone to the village no matter what. Swordsmen of the Zgart family shouldn't ignore injustice just because they're weak. To his surprise, the MC simply turned and told him he did well. He explained that thanks to their dedication, he was able to exploit the green battle phantom's weakness, and every single one of them contributed to the victory. If even one of them had been missing, he wasn't sure how it all would have ended, so he thanked them from the bottom of his heart. Byrne looked away, grumbling that he didn't see the point of all this talk. Either way, he was just going to get stronger, so something like this never happened again. That way he could finally stop relying on him. Then he turned to Martha, telling her she did a great job too, explaining that he only had a chance to recover because she kept that freak distracted. He was just glad she'd followed his orders. She simply smiled at that, asking what good she'd be if she couldn't even manage that much, and said she was heading over to the villagers. They needed to help them with the repairs, but there was no rush. As Ron finally got a moment to rest after the battle, he couldn't help but wonder if this mission was finally over. His consciousness started to fade. He felt his strength draining away his legs, giving out from under him as he began to topple over. But Luna caught him calling his name and asking if he was all right. He looked at her and asked if it was that obvious he wasn't doing so hot. She said it reminded her of that time back in the training hall. It looked to her like every last ounce of strength had just fled his body. A small smile touched his lips as he realized he wasn't the only one looking out for them. They were keeping an eye on him too. He thanked her for that. But then something else caught his attention. The system announced that he had demonstrated exceptional abilities, surpassing his own limits in this extreme battle. He had successfully ambushed an opponent far stronger than him, unlocking an invisible blow. For defeating a foe superior in both strength and rank, he had obtained the title Unshakable. A status window materialized in front of him, displaying his name. It listed the title Unshakable, the status Frost Curse, and 5 nodes followed by his stats Rage, Ring of Fire, and Legendary Sense at the 4th stage. Technique of 1,000 Flames, Flame Resistance, 3rd stage Frost Water Resistance, and the new 1st stage Invisible Strike. Strength was at 57 points, Agility at 58 points, Endurance at 59 points, Energy at 42 points, and Sense at 64 points. He looked it over, thinking this must be the reward for taking down the Green Battle Phantom. All his stats had gotten a nice boost, plus he'd scored a new title and a new skill. The protagonist pushed himself up, called out to Luna, and told her he was fine and that she should head back to the village. He was just going to do a quick sweep to make sure he hadn't missed anything. He thought to himself that this unshakable title was something else. It was much better than he'd expected. The system provided a description. The title, Unshakable, is awarded to those who don't flinch in a fight even against a stronger opponent. Properties. When fighting an enemy stronger than you, all stats increase by 3%. He read it and thought 3%. It doesn't sound like much, but as I get stronger, the raw number of stat points I get from that will also increase. I've still got a lot of tougher enemies ahead of me, so this effect will definitely come in handy. The system then notified him about the first stage of Invisible Strike when attacking from an ambush. Your presence will be harder to detect, and the chance of dealing a decisive blow to the enemy will increase. He read the description and thought, so, Invisible Strike is basically an assassination skill. If he'd gotten this before attacking the Phantom, could he have taken it out in one hit from the start? Wrath appeared beside him, scoffing, "You got a reward like that for beating such a weakling. Even though I'm the one who created the system, where's the common sense in this?" The MC just gave him a small smile and said that it was all thanks to him. I'm getting stronger every day. This infuriated Wrath, who yelled that he would do everything to make his end a long and agonizing one, promising to make him regret everything. He vowed to make every cell in his body scream for an end. The MC paid him no mind, simply walking on and saying, "Feel free to try if you think you can." Of course, his calm reaction only made Wrath even more furious, and he let out an enraged scream. A short while later, the squad members were helping rebuild the houses, with one calling for someone to bring more timber. Another asked where to put the construction debris. The wooden barricade was now complete. He later came to his senses lying in a bed, having only meant to rest for a moment. But it looked like he had been knocked out cold. When he stepped outside, he realized they had already finished repairing the barricades while he was asleep. Luna spotted him calling his name and asking if he was finally up and feeling okay. Ron nodded, confirming he felt much better after getting some rest. She told him they should get going as everyone was already waiting for him. That caught him by surprise, and he asked who exactly was waiting. He headed to the center of the village, where an elder announced that all the villagers had gathered to welcome their savior, the Swordsman Zgart, and thank him for protecting their home. They had risked their very lives to save the village. If it weren't for them, the entire place would have been wiped off the map. The elder declared that they would never forget their noble appearance or their heroic deeds that day. Zgart looked at his comrades, feeling the undeniable respect radiating from them, along with the admiration, gratitude, awe, and sincerity pouring from the villagers. This was the first time he had ever felt such a thing. As an assassin, gratitude was a foreign concept. In his old life, there was only survival. Everything he did was in the name of Daryus, no matter how many souls he reaped for him, no matter how much shadowy work he carried out. All the glory went to Daryus alone. But now for the first time, his own accomplishments were being recognized. Had he ever felt anything like this before? He felt a hunger growing inside him, a desire for even more recognition, a craving to be the focus of more admiring gazes. From this moment on, he would no longer live as a killer in the shadows, but as an honorable swordsman, and he vowed to see this kind of scene many more times. This would be his new life now and forever. Sometime after that, our protagonist asked the village chief if he had a moment, as he had a question for him. The chief turned and assured him that for their savior, he had all the time in the world. They stepped away from the village, and the chief asked what was on his mind. Zgart, with a calm expression, asked if he knew who had ordered the orcs to attack their village. The chief nodded, saying the blue-haired swordsman had told him it was one of the 5 demons of Eden. However, he had no clue why they would be targeted, considering it was just a small, ordinary village. Zgart calmly explained that during the battle, Kibar mentioned that they were looking for a red gem found on Mount Cebu. The village chief confirmed this, admitting that he himself had found it on the mountain as a young man and brought it to the village. Realizing the implication, the chief loudly exclaimed that it couldn't be possible. Zgart stated calmly that Eden had come specifically for that gem. With a worried expression, the chief asked if he really thought all this devastation was because of a single gem, as his village had been brought to the brink of ruin. Zgart explained that they had managed to fend off the attack this time, but Eden would continue to assault the village as long as the gem remained there. The village chief was in disbelief, recounting how after they buried the stone, the harvest grew richer and the village became warmer. To them, it was like a guardian deity. He never imagined it was actually a mana stone that Eden was hunting. He asked what they should do, dig it up, and throw it away. Zgart refused, saying he would take the stone. The chief was taken aback, asking if he, their savior, would truly take on such a burden. Zgart explained that Eden believes the treasure has the power to revive the dead. He reasoned that if they just threw the stone away, Eden's forces would eventually find it, so it was safer for him to take it. The chief replied with a worried voice that even so, if he did that, they would start coming for him instead. He couldn't put their savior in that kind of danger. Zgart calmly reassured him that it would be fine. After all, he said this was the Zgart family way. The village chief nodded, remarking that it seemed he was once again in the Zgart family's debt, a favor he could never repay. This confused Zgart a little, and he asked what the chief meant. The chief explained that many years ago, when he was just a bit older than Zgart was now, Glenn Zgart, the head of the family, had also saved their village. He remembered it all clearly. Just like Zgart, Glenn had saved them from a monster invasion. He described Glenn as an incredibly kind and smiling man. Rowan was a little shocked by this, thinking to himself, kind and smiling. Could they really be talking about the same person? The village chief then turned, saying they'd talked enough, and told Rowan to follow him so he could take him to the precious stone. They arrived at the location, and the chief pointed to the ground, saying this was where it was buried. He confessed he had only brought the stone to the village, hoping to make their lives better. But on the contrary, it had almost destroyed them. He looked at the item in question and asked, "What exactly is this cloth?" The man replied that it was a cloth passed down through his family. He explained he'd wrapped the stone in it to hide the light it was emitting. The protagonist looked at the stone with a grave expression, realizing this must be the Goblin King's mana stone. If this fell into Eden's clutches, a monster wielding the Goblin King's powers could be brought into the world. He said that they absolutely had to keep this stone wrapped in the cloth. He couldn't even finish his sentence before someone nearby spoke up, saying, "So I finally understand." A man now stood beside them, a pensive look on his face, saying that since this cloth was hiding the mana stone's energy, he could never find it, no matter how much he combed through these mountains. "We would have wiped this village off the face of the earth a long time ago if it weren't for this." The protagonist turned to face him with a grim look and demanded, "Who are you?" He was baffled as to how the man had gotten so close without him noticing. With a menacing grin, the man pulled out a helmet shaped like an orc's head and snarled, "What's on his mind?" He stared at the helmet, thinking, "So you're the mad blood demon." The demon, slightly surprised, asked, "You recognize this helmet, son? You're pretty sharp for a common recruit. I can't even get a proper read on your strength. So you're the one who took down the battle phantom." Rand's expression turned grim as he asked, "So you're the commander I heard you weren't supposed to come here personally?" The demon slipped on his helmet, his voice muffled. "This became my mission the moment you killed my subordinate. You only have yourself to blame for forcing my hand." Rand felt an immense pressure, realizing he was trembling just from the demon's presence. It wasn't just him. Even if all the recruits faced this guy together, they'd be wiped out. Wrath materialized beside him. "Rand," he said bluntly, "let's be honest, you can't win this. You have two options. First, you die putting up a pointless fight. Second, you give me control of your body. Those are your only choices." Meanwhile, the rest of the squad was busy fortifying the village. Byrne, with a stoic look, asked Martha why she was there. With a smirk, she replied that she'd heard he was on barricade duty. "So I came to watch. You're actually pretty good at this. Don't you think woodworking suits you better than swordsmanship?" Looking annoyed, Byrne shot back, "If you're done gawking, you can get lost." She retorted, "You should respect your elders. If you want me to leave, you should ask nicely. There's only one person who can give me orders." She then glanced over Spotted Luna and asked, "What are you doing here?" Luna held up a basket. "I was just picking some fruit." Martha questioned why, since the villagers had already fed them. "Therefore ran," Luna explained. "They looked so juicy. I just had to get some for him." Martha sighed. "My such devotion, just like a doting wife." Luna ignored the comment and said she should be going. Suddenly, a massive shockwave and a deafening boom erupted nearby. Luna's head whipped around, realizing that was the exact direction Rand had gone with the Elder. She immediately took off at a full sprint, shouting, "That's where he went with the Elder. Everyone assemble, Aitson, grab your weapons, and get Kane and his squad." As they sprinted toward the chaos, Martha yelled, "That's the Elder's house. What in the world happened?" Burn shouted Rand's name. Ran. If you're alive, answer me. Just then Rand shot past them, carrying the village elder on his shoulder. They were all stunned, screaming his name in shock. He tossed the elder toward Burn, yelling, "Catch!" As he stumbled to his feet, he roared, "Get out of here now! Take the village chief somewhere safe. All of you run," before they could even respond. A powerful tremor shook the ground. An oppressive aura washed over them, making it hard to breathe. One of them gasped, "I can't breathe," while another felt her lungs being crushed. It felt like her lungs were being squeezed. "What is this insane aura?" The demon appeared before them, remarking, "Well, now quite the welcoming party you've gathered here." They stared at his intimidating figure in ogre-like armor, whispering in terror, "Is that the commander from Eden?" Seeing them tremble, he sneered, "Having a little trouble. Breathing in my presence, are you pathetic? And you call yourselves Zarts." Rand's face was grim as he shouted, "Are you all trying to get yourselves killed? Here. They need to snap out of it and get away from here. He'll slaughter them if they stick around. They have to focus their aura just to resist his pressure and get out of here. I have to get as many villagers out with me as I can." Burr agreed, started running, and yelled that he'd come back for him. He shouted the girls' names, telling them to fall back and wait for an opening. They shouldn't even dream of fighting him. Right now, they just need to watch the situation. Instructor Rimmer always said, "You have to break your limits, and this is one of those times. Now is the perfect time to push past the boundaries of my body and mind." The demon let out a smiling laugh and said that he liked his attitude. However, did he honestly believe that just going beyond his limits would be enough? The protagonist stared him down, sword in hand, thinking that the young recruits and the villagers of Cebu are right behind him. If he runs, it's game over for all of them. He had to take his head, no matter the cost. He had to do it, but he couldn't see a single way to pull it off. It felt like standing on a cliff, looking into a bottomless abyss, even in his previous life. This was an incredibly tall order. The demon stood there calmly and asked why he was just staring. He thought he was going to attack, considering all that big talk. But he was just frozen in place. He began to charge, asking, "But what difference does it make?" He shot towards him at high speed and threw a punch, yelling that he'd just attack first then. He watched, completely surprised, and thought that the demon had gotten faster. He reacted, unleashing the technique of 1,000 flames, 10 vortexes of flame heavenly tornado. The demon continued his assault, shouting that, now that was a worthy blow. He'd give him that. The MC thought with a shocked look, did he just punch through the 1,000 fire technique and keep coming? He blocked the strike with his sword, thinking he needed to counter. Immediately after, he leaped aside, realizing that he barely managed to deflect that attack. He'd be dead for sure if he couldn't read his moves with the ring of fire. He had to escape, but it was too soon. He had to create at least one opportunity for those anxiously watching the fight. With that, their odds of survival would go up by 10%, or maybe just a single percent. He charged into attack, but the monster just laughed and told him to go ahead and try. He jumped high into the air, yelling that flames that get snuffed out in one shot were just too boring. He swung his fist as he flew toward him, shouting that he needed to show him something more. He looked on with a worried expression and barely managed to dodge. The demon landed after his attack, got back to his feet, and said that these flames were on a completely different level from a normal aura. The green battle phantom was a moron for sure, but he still thought it was strange that he lost to them. Now it all made sense. However, that wasn't going to change anything for him. After all, fire was useless against him. But did he know why Ron looked at him with a tired expression and said that, of course he knew, it was all because of the helmet he was wearing. That's where an ogre's true strength is. The kings of the forest, the ogres can't be harmed even by raging forest fires as long as they're fiercely protecting their territory. These monsters don't even react to volleys of fire arrows, piercing them during battles with humans. The Mad Blood Demon can use that very same feature of the ogres. The demon calmly stared at him and said that he understood perfectly then that no matter how much he used it, it would be utterly useless against him. A real shame. He replied that since fire doesn't work, he'll just use something else. He looked at him with a grave expression as an icy aura began to swirl around him. The demon was a bit surprised by this and asked about it. He was already shocked by his fire attribute aura. Even if it was useless against him to be able to use multiple different attributes and swordsmanship at his age. Just who in the hell was he? He met his gaze with a stern look and asked why he needed to know. He was going to die soon anyway. He laughed at that, saying it was quite arrogant. He'll see how long his confidence holds up. At that very moment, Burr and the rest of the party were returning from the village to where the battle was raging. He was completely floored watching the protagonist go toe-to-toe with the demon. As he watched, he realized that wasn't the fire aura he usually uses, but an ice one. Hold on, can he use multiple types of aura? That color and his swordsmanship? When in the world did he become a swordmaster on this continent? Knights are generally split into two categories based on their power level. Anyone who wields a weapon gets classified by their skill with aura. Those just getting the hang of aura are called beginners. Once they've mastered it enough to channel it from their bodies into their weapons, they're called aura masters. On top of that, there are those who have perfected their aura and can freely release it into the space around them. The ones who can wield that energy as if it were a sword itself are considered recognized aura experts. According to that system, he's somehow reached the expert level capable of wielding his aura perfectly. In theory, that's impossible. Yet here he is holding his own against the Mad Blood Demon, a known expert. He was facing a ridiculously powerful enemy, and yet the monster hadn't even managed to land a significant hit on him. He noticed the MC looking his way and knew exactly what it meant. He was about to create an opening for them to strike. They'd trained together for so long they could read each other's minds with just a glance. He looked over at the girls next to him. They got the message and both nodded in agreement. He thought to himself that as members of the Zgart family, it was their duty to protect the village, with him by their side. They could pull off anything. Rayon charged the monster, then yelled back at his allies that now was their chance to attack. The two of them charged in unison, their weapons a blur of motion, confident that their combined power would be more than enough to handle him. The demon, however, with a chillingly calm expression, thought to himself, "I've been waiting for this." The second they attacked, he unleashed a massive wave of energy that sent them all flying. Burr was shocked by this, thinking, "That's a fighting aura. He can just blast us away with it like a shockwave." This freak's power level is completely off the charts. The demon just laughed and said in a dead serious voice that he was starting to worry he'd have to chase them down. He was grateful they were saving him the time and effort. He just loved watching hope crumble into absolute despair. Did they honestly think they could beat him? They were dead wrong, and today they were all going to die for not knowing their place. But the protagonist, with a grim look on his face, yelled back that he wasn't the only one here who was happy about this opportunity. He realized all the assassin instincts from his past life allowed him to channel that cold energy, concentrating the Thousand Lights technique into a single devastating point. He unleashed the zenith of the technique, slamming it right into the demon's gut. He stood his ground, looking exhausted as he stared down his opponent. The monster's attack came to a dead stop. It grabbed the sword's blade and asked, "You figured out my weak point instantly, but you funneled all your aura into that one attack? You would have been a goner if you'd missed." Immediately after, it threw a massive punch that sent him flying backward. His sword shattered as the demon sneered that to overcome the gap in their strength. That little trick just wasn't going to be enough. He stared back, realizing he thought he could pierce the demon as long as he concentrated his aura. But he couldn't even get through its muscles. It had hardened its skin and muscle to block his sword. So this, he thought, is the power of an aura master. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he announced he was out of options. "As your leader, I'm ordering all rookies to get out of here." Burr couldn't believe it and yelled, "What are you talking about? He shouted back that there was no way they could defeat this thing. They had to save themselves and the townspeople. He knew time was running out. They had to evacuate the squad members and the residents to minimize the number of casualties. The MC yelled his name, asking if he really thought dying like this was a worthy end for a member of the Zgart family. "If you don't think so, then do as you're told." Burr finally roared the order to retreat. As everyone started to flee, he yelled for them to run faster to get away from the Mad Blood demon. They had to save as many people as they possibly could from that monster. Luna glanced back, her face etched with worry, and cried out his name, "You have to survive, Ren." He gave them a faint smile, a silent promise that he understood. As he reached for his sword on the ground, the demon scoffed, "Do you really think those little bugs can escape from me? Although I'm far more interested in something else. Are you really planning to hold me off, all by yourself, while they run away?" Rand stood his ground and called out, "Wrath, I'm offering you a deal." Wrath materialized beside him with a massive grin. "Finally my turn to shine. What kind of deal can you make when you're about to die? What could you possibly bet?" Rand simply replied, "The bet is on which one of us dies first." Wrath just laughed, asking if he seriously thought he stood a chance of winning. He taunted that the odds were basically zero, but to have even a sliver of hope, he'd need his aura and body fully restored. And the price for that would be accepting all of Wrath's power. The demon figured, hey, if you die, I can't take your body anyway, so he agreed to the deal, promising to restore him. Wrath mused aloud, wondering if the kid could truly handle his full power. Just then, an intense wave of pain racked the protagonist's body. The demon stared, completely baffled, and demanded, "What is this?" He hadn't chugged any ogre or troll blood, so how was this recovery possible? It was completely unbelievable. Our hero pointed his sword right back at him and said, "Told you so." "There's no reason for you to know," he declared. "Now let's get to it and fight until one of us drops." Meanwhile, back in the village, Byrne was rallying the others, telling them to stick together just as they were ordered. Their job was to help the injured and anyone who couldn't move on their own. He knew everyone was exhausted, but he stressed that they had to move fast. Time was running out. They needed to reach a safe zone and fast. The other squad members, their faces etched with worry, started asking what was happening and if they were really going to be all right. Byrne knew deep down that the worst was yet to come. Martha, her expression grim, cut in, reminding them that Ron was out there fighting that monster for every single one of them. He's still fighting, even with a busted arm and cracked ribs, she yelled